I'm on my own mostly because sometimes it's nice to just be able to uh, focus a little bit differently, if that makes sense. But okay, so what we're mostly going to be doing for the rest of today is just articulating some of the thought processes that we've kind of been going over in terms of this magic school magic system, because well, it's all well and good that we've been kind of fleshing out the magic system itself while we've been working on this magic school aspect. We are more so wanting to focus on the magic school itself rather than the magic system right now, for the most part. And it is kind of obvious, I guess, that we need to know how the system works in order to do it. So I do have a pretty good idea in my head of how it's going to be implemented. That should be enough for us to kind of continue from here. So, what we're kind of going to do now is just move a bunch of this stuff around. So I am going to go ahead and grab it all and move it on down here. And we're just going to have that conveniently located there as we begin putting the building blocks that we've made together. So, I am going to create a new little column here. We'll get a board of notes for us to start working on. We're kind of gonna just note down in this one little section everything we want for the school. So it is going to be a magic school with 3 year levels. Years 1 to 3 for 15 to 17 year olds. State sponsored school. Which teaches both practical and theoretical applications of magic in relation to magic engineering, well as every day. I guess we'll just call it. Well, combat magic is definitely going to be a big thing that we're going to kind of have in play, but I think there'll be some everyday uses that kind of fall in between the range of magic engineering and combat magic, which we don't necessarily need to worry about talking about how that works quite just yet. So we have the approximately 5 schools of magic based on the laws of physics. Each school of magic has their own magic tower. Each school of magic has a house name and a magical creature that represents them. Cool. So that's a pretty good indicator of how the school itself is kind of going to work in that sense. So it's going to be a dormitory school. And I'll say with the towers, the students will stay in their own magic towers for their magic schools, of course. So I think in general we'll have like the first year younger students on ground level and older third year older students at the tower peak. Now I'm wondering whether or not we would have separate areas for the professors to live in, essentially. So maybe some kind of central communal magic tower for classes, meetings, a communal hall, and professor dormitories, etc. as well. So they can stay separately from all the students. Cool. Outside of that, let me think a little bit here. So, briefly mentioned a little bit earlier how the calendar years in this world are basically going to be a lot shorter. So that's definitely going to affect like how much we can cram into any one given school year. So the major things we want are like inter-school tournaments, school tournaments versus other academies, etc. The Knight Academy we mentioned prior. But this is these kind of student relations are mostly going to be with other schools within the central continent, so we're not going to worry about anything kind of located elsewhere. Let me see. So, field trips, expeditions to locations of magical significance to schools of magic. So again, that's kind of a reference a bit to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like the Charged Stone Cave example from Pokemon there. Okay, let me see. So we're going to have classes, exams, as well as extra curricular activities, games, sports, clubs. It's a little bit of everything there. Yeah, so we'll have first year students learn a bit about everything magic related in general. Second and third years take on specialized courses for schools of magic. So we were debating a little bit earlier about the TTRPG gameplay mechanics system for this, for what will essentially be the wizard class in terms of having access to all these different schools of magic. And the finalized result of whatever that's going to be come to be probably won't be decided for quite some time, but it is kind of necessary to think about it a little bit now. Just in terms of like balancing purposes for the worldview of what these people are actually going to be capable of. Because yeah, we were talking about the magic system itself and how it doesn't make sense for one person to not be able to use another school's type of magic unless there's like some actual kind of restriction that prevents them from using it. So I am kind of leaning back into thinking about how only certain types of these magic skills might be usable by any certain individual at any one given time. But that's I'm not necessarily saying that in the sake of limiting to a single one, but maybe limiting them to up to a maximum of 3. Again, that's probably going to be more so for gameplay mechanic purposes if anything, but at the same time I don't really want to limit the creation of this worldview around that, if that makes sense, because we're going to have all these other systems of different kind of powers, like I've mentioned runic magic before, and like aura users from knights and whatnot, and they're going to be basically able to use everything within the scope of their domain. So it kind of makes a lot of sense to not limit people from using what they want, so long as they should be capable of it. But at the same time, it's more so a question of if they can use everything, how do we kind of balance the leveling process? Because I'm thinking the most practical thing to do might be to start them out being able to use everything up to like a basic standard, and then as they like go on adventures, I might actually elaborate a bit on the adventure system here, because I don't know if I've gone too in-depth into that yet, but basically how the adventure or quest system is going to work. It'll be similar to like a D&D campaign or module, but probably a bit more shorter and standalone per adventure per level, if that makes sense, and everything will kind of be balanced within the realm of a single level for the adventure. So in relation to wizards and their magical system here, for instance, basically what they would do is you'd have the students go on an adventure to Charged Cave, for example, and maybe they find some kind of artifact or treasure or get some kind of power up in relation to their electromagnetism magic, which makes that aspect of their magic stronger without influencing the strength of the rest of their magic, if that makes sense. So I think just that way, in terms of level scaling for this wizard class, it'll be a bit different perhaps to other schools of magic systems like the rune system. Or maybe I need to rethink this entirely. So I'll bring up the runic system, for example. Basically how that'll work is you can write out a series of runes, and basically as you become more powerful you can write sequences of more runes at any one given time. So maybe we need to go more in line with that, rather than like increasing the power of the whatever magnetism they're capable of. Maybe they can, like as a thermodynamics user starting off the bat, maybe they do have the capacity to freeze and burn pretty much from the get-go, but perhaps the wizard leveling system can instead be, rather than like making it the freezing even colder or the flames more intense, maybe it's they can freeze wider areas, or freeze more targets at once, or even combine their magic circles with other runic system, not runic system, but other spell circle systems, and maybe utilize more than one type of magic at once or something. I think that might be the better way of going about it, because again, the one thing I don't want to do is limit the creativity and freedom of the powers that these guys essentially gain access to. So I think that might be the most appropriate way to kind of handle this system in particular. So let's see. In that case... Yeah, so we might have them continue to learn a little bit about all types of magic. And they can just have their preferences for whichever ones they kind of want to learn more about the utilizations of than others. I think that's a good way to do it. Okay, anything else we need to do with that there? Let's look at our other notes. So we've kind of got that covered. We'll keep that there. Noted that. Okay, we'll revisit that as well, because I think basically what this means is how the system we're going to do. Students get to choose their house magic school specialty. Okay. So we've mentioned that this is a state-sponsored school for the purpose of raising the youth of tomorrow to be magic engineers and combat mages or military mages. Okay. I think we're kind of putting things together well here. I'm going to bring this up a little. Once we kind of got all the general notes kind of condensed well in this single section, then we're going to go back into diving into some of these a little more individually. Okay, so we know we're going to want to have these field trips. That's fine. Okay, and we'll take a quick note about the students' entrance exam process for determining magical capability. Measures the three main magic criteria. And we kind of listed these out a bit in our discussion earlier. So, how fast magic is produced, how strong the magic produced is, and let me see. Just need to think about it a bit more in conjunction with this neural system we've got going on here in terms of like nerve conduction and all that other nerdy ass shit. Okay. Let me do bullets for this. So that's going to be magic processing speed, magic density, and what the other thing was. Cool. So there was an argument there to have the magic capacity, which is a typical kind of third thing that's looked at, like how much mana one can utilize. But that leads us back into the question of like environmental significance in terms of utilizing these different forms of magic? Like, how much of this power is utilized based on the laws or rules of the world at large, and how much comes from the mage or wizard in general? Because I do think having some kind of third utilization is important, because well, creativity for what you can do with your powers is like, should be considered a major consideration of how one utilizes their magic. I don't think it's necessarily something that would restrict someone from being enrolled into a magic school, for example, because it's not necessarily the ability to use magic, rather the expression of how you use it. So, let me see here. For now, I'm going to put magic capacity. And so, well, that could be seen as like how much for how long someone can use magic. It can also be determined as like how much magic you can use at once, if that makes sense. So rather than focusing on a single spell circle, it's more so a matter of like how big the area of effect could be, or how many you could produce at once, for instance. So I'd say that's a pretty good criteria we can use for that there. We're just going to put here in bold a question for us to answer later. So we want to ask, how does magic work? How much influence of power comes from the environment? How much influence of power comes from the mage / wizard? So we aren't going to worry about what we're going to kind of refer to this quote-unquote class of just yet, but it's just a question we need to keep in mind for later. Okay. So, magic itself is utilized by exerting your will onto the world, manifested by one's imagination / processing of neural pathways. So it's very much a magic from the mind. So I'll say what we'll do is we will rewrite over the laws / properties of the world, utilizing atmospheric mana to do so. And I think that kind of answers that question. So yeah, theoretically, anyone can be a wizard in that case, but unless they have the capacity to... We'll say magic is like a muscle. So if you have a young child who knows that lifting a rock is possible by picking it up with his hands, using his arms and legs and back, his strength to pick up this rock with his muscles, magic might be seen as having some kind of similar process. But rather than using your muscles, you're using your mind directly like a muscle, and you, rather than like physically grabbing something to influence its properties or change its behavior, you're literally doing that with your mind. And if you can't develop the muscle of this mind in such a way to be able to influence this behavior, then you can't use this form of magic, if that makes sense. And learning that, how to use that muscle, and how to bend it, flex it, and apply it, is what the wizard school is going to teach, basically. But unless people can learn to find that mind muscle and flex it themselves, then they can't be taught at all. So I guess in that case, yeah, that'll determine how people get into the school. Like if they have the innate talent to be able to feel this muscle and use it without being taught, essentially, or with limited instruction, because being a state-run magic institution as it is, they need people capable of applying themselves, so they can't just take anyone in. But I think that is pretty good. Alright, so I'll just take down mana is atmospheric. I'll put here. Mana is atmospheric. Different locations of the world have different densities of mana, which can make utilization of magic easier or more difficult, or impossible, depending on the location. Some locations are more innately attuned with different schools of magic, which make it easier to generate manifestations of power influencing their domain. Cool, so yeah. In that case, if we treat the world or the land itself as being a form of mana, we'll say like places of great heat, like a volcano, will be easier to influence the power of like thermodynamic magic in terms of heating, or vice versa, like icy places like glaciers will be easier to do the same with cooling. And the same again with the electromagnetic example of the what we mentioned earlier, like charged on cave. Then at the same time, we have like any place with like light, sunlight, or firelight will make it more easier to utilize optic magic. Whereas if you have a lack of light, if some places dark or whatnot, it might make the optic part of the visual magic more difficult. But if you have sound carry greater for longer when everything else is quieter around you, it might be easier to implement acoustic magic in that case. So we'll have quite a few different utilizations of that there. Cool. And we're going to put that here as well. no further notes below. So now, let's expand on these sections a bit. So we've got the Schools of Magic. We might end up calling those something else, since since we're making a School of Magic here. Calling the Schools of Magic could be confusing at times. But we'll leave that for now. Let me see. So we want something for Magic Towers. Alright. Cool. So, we've got annual activities there as well. So, for now, what I'm thinking we're doing, just think about these a little bit more. Theoretically, the best place to start from here, now that we've kind of good idea of all of this pretty much determined, would be to kind of finish kind of finalizing our Schools of Magic here. Because if we are going to be building this magic school around these magic systems, we need to know what they are and what they do. So we have thermodynamics, kinematics, electromagnetism, optics, and acoustics. This final one for like gravity, energy, mass, space-time. This is the one I've been a little bit unsure if I wanted to implement, or if I did want to implement it, how I would do so, because this would probably be the most game-breaking one, I would say, in terms of like just in sheer like how much stuff you could literally change or destroy by this power. But because even though there is going to be magic in this world, I don't want magic to be omnipotent or universal or all-powerful or anything like that. Like, we want someone with a sword and shield to be able to fight a mage if it comes to a one-on-one. And if a mage can just like stop time or just lift a guy up into the air, then pretty much rendered powerless to do anything about it. So, we have hot and cold, we have electricity and magnetism, we have force and motion, and we have sound and light. So, what would like gravity, energy, mass, space, or time bring to the equation? Space and time I'm just eliminating completely because they're too broken. So gravity, increasing weight, decreasing weights. And energy would be kind of the... There's a few ways you can interpret energy, because it's not necessarily like the energy that powers things, which falls under like kind of the electrical aspect of electromagnetism. But you can also see it as like the energy as a source of like fuel for like organic things too, like actually producing force and motion through movement. Because that kind of overlaps with kinematics a bit as well. So you might see a bit here why I was a bit undecided about this 5th category. Honestly, I think I am going to be comfortable removing it entirely, because while there is like a theoretical argument to add or do more different and newer and creative things with that 5th potential skill that the other 4 can't, I just like the more separate overlap of these other 4 schools that kind of stand out a bit more on their own, away from having multiple overlap unnecessarily with a 5th. But rather than put like gravity or space-time manipulation or any of that kind of stuff under this particular classification of magic, as mentioned a few times already, we are going to have different systems based on like the cultures of the world, depending on where you are, like with the runic system and everything else. So we do still have the option to utilize those particular types of powers somewhere else later on, without having to worry about how it overlaps with the rest of these ones here. And I think 4 is a kind of better number for the magic towers and the magic schools and whatnot we kind of want to do here. So that works out very well indeed. So this influences temperature, hot and cold, burning and freezing, force and motion, electromagnetism. I'm just going to do electricity and magnetics for now. I know that's probably not the best kind of way to define that, but it gives you enough of an idea of what it will kind of revolve around. And then we'll have optics and acoustics being light / vision, and sound / vibration. Yeah, I think light and vibration is a more interesting and apt way to do that. Cool. So, I might not necessarily expand on all of those immediately, because there isn't any real need to, if that makes sense. Like, I've pretty much said from the beginning, you're basically going to be able to do anything within the confines of this power, of these powers, so I don't really want to limit them, if that makes sense. But since they are the schools of magic, we might expand here a bit later. This is some of the who's and how's of everything they do, even if we don't need to do that now. So we are going to leave that very well enough alone, and we'll just bring that back here for now. Cool. Now, the magic towers are going to be the same. So we are going to have the 4 magic towers, 1 for each school, 1 magic beast for each. So what we need to do here, basically, is determine how I kind of want to like divide these schools a bit. So we've noted down the important points here, but you know, like Harry Potter is going to be the most classic reference, comparison, contrast example for the purposes of this for obvious reasons. But so you've got the 4 houses of like Gryffindor and Hufflepuff and Slytherin and Ravenclaw. And they each have their own symbols, their own color, their own principles, and whatnot. So what we kind of want to do is something a bit similar to that. So with these magic towers, so we want to come up with a representation for each tower. So thermodynamics, for example, could be like a red and bluey kind of color scheme. I'm just going to quickly go back in and grab that. Red, blue color scheme. Magical beast is X. Yeah, so what kind of applications of magic do these guys kind of do with thermodynamics? Because heating and cooling obviously have very big combat and engineering capacities in terms of like throwing fireballs or like summoning freezing storms and like heating and cooling people's homes, etc., etc. Electromagnetism. I'm thinking like a yellowy gold / grey color scheme. Along a similar line. But just in terms of like colors of representation, optics and acoustics being literally like light and sound, and kinematics being force and motion, makes it a little bit more difficult to really come up with some kind of color scheme to represent those houses, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking with them, let me see. We might even hold off on that until we like design these magical creatures that they take their inspiration from in terms of that. So it might be quite a while before we get to any kind of designing process for creatures and whatnot, because while I do love designing like magical creatures and shit for what they are, it's also a very specialized thing that would have to focus on for like a good chunk of time. I think it's more important to come up with like the environment around this place and everything else a bit more first. Cool, so we'll leave that for now. Cool. Alright. And similar to the above, so we're gonna have like 4 of these annual events as well. So we kind of want to come up with a specialty of each of these schools. So I would say thermodynamics would probably be specializes in combat magic, whereas electromagnetism probably specializes in magical engineering, the invention of new technologies. Optics and acoustics is more so like espionage, subterfuge, stuff like that. And kinematics is probably has a bit of overlap with magical engineering as well. I feel like just the power of like movement and force has the most overlap with all other 3 schools. So we'll say universal application. Because yeah, just thinking about like practical applications of these features. So with electromagnetism, for example, you could come up with like train and rail kind of transport systems that don't rely on like steam power or some of the other technologies that might be prevalent in this world. Maybe even some kind of like levitation or flying vehicle or something like that. But even though those vehicles are their own, the power of like movement and force that kinematic springs could help move those as well. Same with like subterfuge and espionage and like spying and all that. Like if you're like breaking and entering or doing any kind of that infiltration work, the enhancing your movements and whatnot with kinematics could come into play there. And then we also have combat magic, like if you're out on the field fighting in a battle or a war or whatever else, the ability to move quickly again just comes into play a great deal there. So while even outside of like just moving quickly and exerting a lot of force can be useful in like war scenarios, it's probably not as effective as like summoning a giant fireball in terms of like a full-on military scale. Let's see. Just gonna check in on my music there. Cool. Yeah, so we want those guys to like specialize in one of these activities as well. So we'll have the magic engineering, magic for combats. Even if acoustics and optics is an effective form of espionage, I don't know if they would necessarily teach espionage in the school itself. So I think it'll fall more under the engineering and combat aspects. So for that purpose, I'd say maybe the school itself would treat kinematics as more of a combat focus and optics and acoustics is more of an engineering one, or vice versa. But we don't have to worry about the details of that as much right now. Cool. Well, I think let's go back to these magic classes. So we've got a few ideas in mind for how these are going to work. But I think there's going to be a very big difference between the first year and the second year. Well, the first year and the second and third years. So let's bring up a new list here. And we're going to create 4 little things here. So we are going to say there's 4 stages of the schooling process: pre-enrollment, exams, first year, second year, and third year. I know I've already used the Magic School board name for the one bar inside, but and for this, but I'll sort out the names and title cards a bit later on. We don't have to worry about that too much for now. Okay. So that's what we're gonna do now here. We're gonna have a bit of an individual focus. each of these sections. So we've got pre-enrollment, first year, second year, third year. Cool. And yeah, what we're going to do is pretty much just come up with what's going to happen when a student who wants to come to the school what happens when they come here. Alright, so pre-enrollment, we've kind of already briefly touched on how that'll work. So this is what we want to take there. Cool. So the entrance exam process for determining magical capability measures the three main magic criteria: magic processing speed, magic density, and magic capability. So how would a school test these things? Would they kind of test them all at once? Or would they teach them separately? Students who wanted to enter the Magic Academy have to prove their capability for utilizing magic. Other than being tested on the three main criteria of what makes a mage, students are also tested as to whether or not they can even feel the muscle needed to work magic to begin with, and whether or not they can utilize it even if they can feel it. So I'd say for the purposes of this, we want a way for them to be able to test the magic capability without them necessarily being even able to use magic. So students need to be tested for magic capability without being able to use magic. Okay. In that case, how do we achieve this outcome? So first they do the test to see if they can even feel the mind to muscle connection. And if they are successful in that, they would want to exert mana to create a circle. Just a plain old magic circle without the intention of producing any kind of phenomenon or effects. So, draw a circle in the air with mana, or on parchment with mana. So rather than drawing it in the air, I think drawing it on some form of parchment or some other form of surface will be a more apt testing process, even if it isn't a general practical application of mana utilized for magic. Mostly because by recording it on parchment, you should be able to theoretically judge basically how fast it took to draw this thing, or how dense the mana during it was, how large or how many the circles are. So basically using raw mana in and of itself without applying some kind of effects. And I haven't touched base on mana itself as much as of yet, but basically how mana, how I intend for mana to like be a thing, or how it works is will basically be a form of like raw energy, which can basically be manipulated to produce phenomenon. While this system in particular uses its own systematic rules for the bending and harnessing of mana, that's in confines with the rules of reality. Whereas other systems, like the runic system I mentioned earlier, they'll be able to achieve the same kind of purpose and exerting their will on the world through the manipulation of mana. But rather than bending the rules of the world to their liking, it's more so a stronger enforcement of your own will on the world, like breaking the rules to produce the phenomenon you want, like something that theoretically shouldn't be able to happen happens. And that's more in line with like the dragon rune / giant words systems, because of the dragons and giants and whatnot, in their arrogance, they don't work with the world works for them. And that kind of brings us to the basis of how these magics were formed and how they were created and how they were learnt and taught. So the humans, arrogant as they are, while they can't break reality on their own, they have learnt to weave it via a systematic method. Okay. So we'll come up with some kind of material or artifact to accomplish the purpose of what we want here via that mana testing system a little bit later on. Because I imagine having some kind of special material which can record or imprint mana onto it, like maybe with a magic circle or something, a crystal ball. Those will be like useful teaching tools. Skip the vocal song. But with that said, no, I think that is good. So I'm going to create a little thing here to kind of build on these areas a bit later, but So we'll just quickly take down the speed at which one can draw a magic circle, how fast one exerts changes here, there, will to influence the world. I'll be able to write this a bit better later on, but I'm not going for perfection at this stage. So, the density, durability, strength of the magic circles, spells one creates. How large, how numerous one's spells, circles can be. Cool. I'm happy with that. So the first year, I'd say first year students wouldn't be well versed enough to have their own specialties or whatnot yet. What we can do with them there, the problem is they wouldn't necessarily be in a magic tower as of yet. Because the thing is, you could just like have a sorting hat fucking decide their path for them and whack them in whatever house at the get-go, or you could even have them choose their own specialty from the get-go. But there's a difference to like knowing and understanding something theoretically than having a practical application or purpose of it as well. Like when you're a kid growing up, you could think, oh yeah, like, I really want to be a race car driver. But when you actually get behind the wheel, you're terrified of driving and realize you don't want to be the driver, you want to be the mechanic working on the car. Which is, why I don't want to lump students into a magic tower off the bat. So we'll have the 4 towers of the 4 schools on the outskirt for the 2nd and 3rd years, and then like a central tower and buildings in the middle, and those are going to be the ones with the professors and maybe the 1st year students are there as well or something. But yeah, so for now at least, we're also just trying to determine how a year of schooling will go for these students. Because I don't necessarily want to have a tournament for every student every semester of every year. So I'm thinking the 1st year students is mostly like theoretical magic, less practical magic, like learning more about magic itself in general. 2nd year is more practical applications, and 3rd year is an advanced form of that. So we'll say the 1-on-1 wizard intra-school duels takes place during the 2nd year, for instance. Whereas the 1-on-1 / 2-on-2 / group-on-group are inter-school battles rather. Thus the Knight Academy take place during the 3rd year, the more advanced students. Cool. Okay. Okay, so we'll say also, expeditions to places of power. For example, Charge Stone Cave, take place during the second year as well. So that's when the students have their placement into magic towers. Choose their school of specialization. Because while they do get to learn a little bit about everything, the thing is, they're not going to have enough time to specialize in everything. Okay, so what we might do is grab our little thing over here for magic classes, and we're going to bring this inside here. We're also going to grab these annual activities. Cool. So, end of year graduation exam will be a thing for all of them every year. But even outside of that, so I mentioned a little bit before about how some of that stuff is going to work. So even if the second and third years participate in these duels or these battles or whatnot, the first years who won't be able to participate, they can still probably watch them, I would say. I'm thinking, as fun as it would be to have like a massive competition each year, it kind of becomes repetitive from a gameplay standpoint. But that's also why we're going to have like the separate clubs, like the dueling club. So with those who have a more higher interest in that kind of thing can partake in it a little bit more. So I'm just going to throw some random notes down here as well. So we want some kind of magic engineering contest, something to do with a magic beast contest or something. Okay. And yeah, we'll do this a bit like that. There we go. Now, rather than having those separate things, we can kind of get these in a bit better, like this here. There we go. Okay. So. let's figure out our curriculum a little. So we are definitely going to be starting with Magic Fundamentals, in conjunction with Magic Health and Safety, as well as the origin/history of magic. And I think splitting the year into 2 is going to be a bit of a good benchmark for us. And I kind of want to have like 3 classes per year, or per semester, if that makes sense, along with some kind of major event to wrap the semester up. So since, I mentioned again briefly before, the year in this world is going to be shorter than a standard Earth-based calendar year. It's going to be more like 200 days in comparison to like 350, so it's a pretty significant chunk off. So that's like 200 days a thing. That'll be like 100 days a semester. I'm thinking maybe like one semester is like 2 seasons or 2 months, because basically the seasons are basically going to be months in this, and months are essentially going to be more like weeks. That might sound confusing as I kind of just add a bit right there, but I'll expand on that another time. We could do 4 semesters anyway, 1 for each season. Because I do like the seasons being a significant symbolic notion of change and time passing, for instance. The only issue is I might have to come up with more classes in that case. So let's see. Let's take down a note here. School year will be either 2 or 4 semesters, 1 or 2 semesters per season. Each season has next 3 classes. Each season semester ends with X significant event. Cool. In that case, let me do something here. There we go. Okay, I like that. And basically how the semesters are going to be is first semester is going to be spring. redo this quick. So first semester will be spring, second semester will be summer. Fourth semester will be autumn. The final semester will be winter. Just because I feel that's a more symbolic, like, passing of time. Like, winter feels very endy and spring feels very beginning-y. Okay. Alright, so that sounds good to me. So I think with the first year, there's an argument to be had for literally the first semester to literally be nothing but magic fundamentals, because that's going to be a pretty major kind of class. It kind of touches base on everything. And that covers a wider range of learning about magic circles, magic pronunciation, mana flow, yeah, basically literally just like the fundamental utilization of it on its own. Because one of the things I personally dislike about like modern schooling systems is how much of all this different shit they pack into like super short periods of time. Like you take maths, you take English, you take sports, you take science, you take art, you take music, whatever else. It's like nice having the variety of all that different stuff, but you're learning all of these completely contrasting fields all at the same time, and you're expected to perform or excel in all of them all at once, when it's otherwise difficult for people to really focus on any kind of one area at any given time. Because like take online educational resources, for example. If you want to learn about something, you aren't looking for a 3-month curriculum on 6 different subjects. You're looking to focus on learning as much as you can about this one particular field of interest at any kind of one given time, without really wanting to worry too much about focusing on the confines of outside of that. So even if we only have like 1 or 2, even 2 max classes per semester, I think that isn't an unreasonable application of things, especially given that again, these seasons in universe time are like 1 month or 50 days each, and taking like weekends or whatever else into account, if we do really even incorporate weekends into this at all, that ends up being more so like 35 days of that month that you would actually be learning with. Because the weekend day system is going to be different as well. But yeah, I'd say like a 1 month, a 30-day crash course is probably a good scale or scope of this kind of thing in general. Let me see. Yeah, no, I think I'm happy with that actually. So, anything else for magic fundamentals? So we've got the circles, we've got the pronunciation, we've got matter flow, which is basically the circulation. Yeah, no, I think that's good. And in second semester, what we can do is have magic theory, which could be separate to fundamentals, and that'll be more so learning about more of the day-to-day and whatnot, maybe. Let me see. We might not necessarily keep this order of things, but I'd say like having one big major class that kind of focuses on these kind of overlapping areas is probably a good way to do this class structure. So magic theory can talk about magic health and safety, along with the origin and history of magic, as well as magic in daily life. Cool, and that'll be, yeah, the first year is mostly designed to be theoretical, so that is pretty dope. And you kind of got to learn what you're working with before you really start using it. Yes, maybe we will swap these two here. So we'll do Magic Fury before Magic Fundamentals, despite the names. Because Magic Fundamentals is more so leading to the practical application of magic rather than the theoretical. And this won't necessarily be final by any means. We can always shuffle things around a little bit later on. Yeah, because I like having this first, because again it teaches the students how to be safe before they start blasting themselves. Teaches them about like the convenient magical devices that they will have all throughout the towers and the school that can be used by the students. And just like learning how magic originated as well, which is important in the sense of learning why it came to be what it is and how it can be utilized for what it's for, essentially. So I'll come up with like an actual like class thing for these or something at a later point, but yeah. So I like having these together, but I will change the order of them. To that. It might make more sense for this to be a later class as well, but we'll revisit that later. Let me see. Maybe we can have one called the World of Magic, which can kind of cover a few different things like environmental mana, the schools of magic themselves, and let me see. One other thing to go with them for the sake of the free pairings. Now, it might make more sense to have this one together with these. Okay, so I'd want another kind of theoretical class to put with those other two, if anything. Yeah, I'm thinking of swapping these two around as well. Kind of got to learn this before you kind of start getting into this, because this is preparing them to actually be able to use magic. Something. I guess as Dave was saying earlier, I can kind of go into magic lore sooner than intended. Keep all the theoretical shit earlier. Just so they know the whens and wheres of how and when they're allowed to use magic once they do learn it. Okay, no, I do like that. Thank you for that suggestion earlier, Day. Okay. And that means for these final one in the winter, we will have magic application. And that'll kind of be the big free of magic, I would say. So, magic processing, speed, magic density, magic capacity. Not sure what order some of these should technically be in. I think it makes sense to have that first and that second. As for the third and fourth semesters though, fundamentals and application. This is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, I feel, because yes, like magic processing speed, magic density, and magic capacity will be the big freeze of like how and when you're really meant to start utilizing magic for the purpose of spells, but in order to achieve those or use them, knowing how to kind of flow your mana, how to draw circles, and how to pronounce spells are a bit of a necessity, but you can't really do those without the others either. I guess we should swap the names of anything, because this is more the fundamentals of magic here. Whereas this is more so application. Yeah, so we'll do that way. I think I like that. So learning how to feel your mana by channeling it and everything. It's odd because I feel like magic flow should technically come before processing speed, density, and capacity, but circles and pronunciation should probably come after. Am I gonna swap these around again? I probably might, but I'm just gonna spend a minute here to just think it over. I know I don't have to like finalize the decision now, but yeah, no, we will swap them. We'll swap them back. I think that makes the most sense. So the application of magic will come before the fundamentals of magic for some weird reason, but that's kind of how the system works, so it is what it is. But no, I'm pretty happy with that for a first year of classes. So I was talking briefly before about like wanting to have some kind of end of year event or like semesterly activity, but I might get to those a bit later on. I think for now what I might do is take a short break, and I might come back a little later today. And who knows, maybe I'll have some others join me again at that time.